Richard Hayes checked his watch for the fifth time. 7:45. His blind date was 45 minutes late. He sat alone at the corner table of Antonio's, a small Italian restaurant his sister had recommended. The waiter had refilled his water 3 times, each visit accompanied by a sympathetic smile that made Richard want to sink into the floor. At 53, Richard hadn't been on a date in over a decade. After his wife, Patricia, passed from a heart attack 8 years ago, he'd convinced himself that chapter of his life was closed. But his sister Karen had been persistent, insisting her friend's daughter was perfect for him. Now, watching couples around him share meals and conversation, Richard felt foolish for hoping. He signaled for the check. The waiter nodded understandingly. Richard was signing the receipt when he heard the restaurant door burst open. 2 small voices, high-pitched and frantic, cut through the ambient chatter. "Please, someone help. They beat our mum. She's dying." The restaurant fell silent. Richard's head snapped up to see 2 identical girls, no more than 7 years old, standing in the doorway. Their faces were streaked with tears, their matching pink jackets dirty and torn. They were breathing hard, as if they'd been running. Everyone stared. No one moved. Richard was on his feet before he consciously decided to stand. Years of being a pediatric nurse had trained certain instincts into him, instincts that didn't ask questions before responding. "Where is she?" he asked, kneeling to the girl's eye level as he reached them. "Where's your mother?" "The parking lot," one twin gasped. "Behind the building. They hurt her so bad. Please, please help. Call 911, Richard shouted to the restaurant staff, then looked back at the girls. "Show me." "Quick!" The twins ran, and Richard followed, his heart pounding. Behind him, he heard other patrons finally stirring, calling emergency services. Following at a distance, the parking lot behind Antonio's was dimly lit. Richard saw her immediately, a woman crumpled on the asphalt between 2 cars, curled on her side. Even from a distance, he could see blood. "Stay here," he told the twins firmly, then ran to the woman. She was in her early 30s, he guessed, wearing a blue dress now torn at the shoulder. Her face was swollen and bruised, her lips split and bleeding. More concerning was the wound on her temple, still seeping blood, and the way she wheezed with each breath. "Mom, can you hear me?" Richard knelt beside her, his fingers automatically finding her pulse, rapid and thready. Not good. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain and confusion. "My girls," she whispered. "Are they safe?" "They're right there, and they're safe. They came for help." "That was very brave." "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah Mitchell." Her breathing was labored. "3 men. They wanted my purse. I wouldn't. My wedding ring. My husband's ring. He died. I couldn't." "It's okay. Don't try to talk." Richard pulled off his jacket and pressed it gently against the head wound. "Ambulance is coming. I'm a nurse. I'm going to stay with you." Behind him, the twins were crying quietly. Other people had gathered now, keeping a respectful distance. "You were supposed to meet someone," Sarah whispered suddenly, her eyes trying to focus on his face. "For dinner." 7 o'clock. "Richard Hayes?" Richard froze. "What?" "Karen's brother." "That's you." I'm your blind date." "I'm so sorry I'm late." A sound that might have been a laugh turned into a cough. Blood flecked her lips. The world seemed to tilt. This battered woman on the asphalt, fighting for consciousness, was the woman he'd been waiting for. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice thick. "Don't you dare apologize. You just focus on breathing. Sarah, stay with me." In the distance, sirens began to wail. The emergency room was a chaos Richard knew well from his years working in hospitals. But being on this side, he was the worried companion rather than the medical professional who felt entirely different. The twins, who he'd learned were named Emma and Lily, sat on either side of him in the waiting room. They'd been checked over by a nurse, physically unharmed but emotionally traumatized. Their grandmother was on her way, but she lived 2 hours away. "Is our mom going to die?" Emma asked, her voice very small. Richard looked at these 2 little girls with their mother's eyes and felt his heart break. "The doctors here are very good. They're taking excellent care of her, like you did," Lily said. "You helped her. You didn't even know us, But you helped. That's what people do, Richard said gently. When someone needs help, we help. That's all. Not everyone, Emma said, with a bitterness too old for her young face. Everyone in the restaurant just stared. Only you came. Richard didn't know what to say to that. He just put his arms around both girls and held them while they cried. A doctor emerged 2 hours later. Sarah had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and significant bruising, but she would recover. They were keeping her overnight for observation, but she was stable and asking for her daughters. The girls were allowed to see her briefly. Richard waited outside the room, planning to leave once their grandmother arrived. His role was finished. He was just a stranger who'd happened to be there. But when the twins emerged from Sarah's room, Emma ran straight to him. "Mum wants to see you. She asked for you specifically." Sarah looked small in the hospital bed, her face a canvas of bruises, but her eyes were clear and focused when Richard entered. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. What a terrible first impression. Richard found himself smiling despite everything. "Well, it's certainly memorable. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck. But alive, thanks to you." She paused, then added quietly, "I thought I was going to die in that parking lot. I kept thinking about my girls, about them being alone. And then you were there. I'm glad I could help. Karen told me about you, about your wife, about you being a nurse, about you being kind and patient and one of the good ones." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She wasn't exaggerating. Richard felt his own throat tighten. "You need to rest. The girl's grandmother is taking them tonight." "But Richard, would you stay, just for a little while?" "I don't want to be alone right now." "I know that's asking a lot from someone who's basically a stranger." "Buta." "I'll stay," Richard said, "as long as you need." Richard stayed not just that night, but came back the next morning, and the next. Sarah was released after 3 days, and he drove her and the twins home to their small house on Maple Street. Over the following weeks, as Sarah recovered, Richard found himself woven into their lives in unexpected ways. He'd stop by after his shifts at the hospital to check on Sarah's healing ribs, but he'd stay for dinner. He'd bring groceries, claiming they were extras he didn't need. He'd help the twins with homework at the kitchen table while Sarah rested. "You don't have to do all this," Sarah told him one evening, watching him help Emma with a math problem. "I know," Richard replied, "but I'd like to, if that's okay." What he didn't say was how empty his house had felt for 8 years, how he'd been going through the motions of living without really being alive, how these 3 people, this brave woman and her remarkable daughter Sir, had awakened something in him he'd thought was gone forever. Sarah's husband, Michael, had been a firefighter who died saving a family from a burning building when the twins were only 2. She'd been raising them alone for 5 years, working as a teacher's aide and struggling to make ends meet. The wedding ring the muggers had wanted was the last piece of Michael she had left. "I couldn't let them take it," she said. "I know that sounds foolish. I could have died for a piece of metal. But it was all I had of him." "It wasn't foolish," Richard said. "It was love." "There's nothing foolish about that." 3 months after that night in the parking lot, Richard took Sarah and the twins to the fall festival in the town square. The girls ran ahead, chasing each other through the maze of booths and carnival games, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. "They adore you," Sarah said, watching them. "Emma told me yesterday that she wishes you were her dad." Richard felt his eyes sting. "What did you tell her?" "That you're our friend, our very special friend, and that we're lucky to have you in our lives." Sarah paused, then took Richard's hand. "I didn't tell her that. I've been thinking the same thing. Not about wanting you to be her dad specifically, but about what it might be like if this became something more." Richard stopped walking. He turned to face her, this woman who'd stumbled into his life in the most traumatic way possible and somehow brought light back into the darkness. "I loved my wife," he said carefully. "I loved Patricia with everything I had. When she died, I thought that was it for me. I thought I'd had my chance at happiness and it was over." Sarah's face fell slightly. "I understand. I shouldn't have here." "Let me finish," Richard said gently. "I thought it was over. But then 2 little girls ran into a restaurant screaming for help, and everything changed. I'm not trying to replace Michael. I know you still love him. But Sarah, if you're asking whether I could see a future with you and Emma and Lily, the answer is yes. God help me, yes. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? I know it's complicated. I know we're both carrying grief. But maybe that's exactly why this could work. We both know how precious time is, how quickly everything can change, how important it is not to waste the chances we're given. Sarah reached up and touched his face. Karen was right about you. You are one of the good ones. So are you, Richard said. So are those two beautiful girls. And I'd like to be part of your lives, if you'll have me. Emma and Lily came running back, faces painted like butterflies, cotton candy in their hands. Can Richard come with us on the Ferris wheel? Lily asked. Please. Sarah looked at Richard, a question in her eyes. I'd love to, he said. A year and a half later, on a warm June evening, Richard and Sarah were married in a small ceremony in the same town square where they'd attended that fall festival. Emma and Lily stood beside their mother as junior bridesmaids, wearing matching lavender dresses and beaming with joy. Karen, Richard's sister, cried through the entire ceremony. I tried to set you up, she said at the reception. But I had no idea it would turn into this, that it would be so perfect. Neither did I, Richard admitted, watching Sarah dance with the twins. I almost didn't go that night. I almost cancelled. But you didn't. But I didn't. Richard smiled. And two little girls ran into a restaurant and changed everything. On the mantel in their new home, a bigger house with room for every near, Richard placed two photographs side by side. One of Patricia, his first love, smiling on their wedding day, and one of Sarah and the twins, taken the day Sarah came home from the hospital. He'd loved twice in his life. Lost once, found again. And he'd learned that sometimes the best things come from the worst moments. That sometimes, when you think your story is over, it's really just beginning a new chapter. That sometimes, being stood up for a blind date is the best thing that could ever happen to you. Because two little girls needed help, and in helping them, he'd saved himself. Thank you, Sarah said to him on their wedding night, for not walking away, for staying when you could have left, for choosing us. Richard kissed her forehead. Thank you for being late to our date. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for letting me love you. From down the hall, they heard the twins giggling in their new bedroom, probably still too excited to sleep. They're happy, Sarah whispered. So am I, Richard said. For the first time in years, I'm truly happy. And he was. Because sometimes, life gives you a second chance. And sometimes, that second chance comes running through a restaurant door, desperate and afraid, calling for help. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, answering that call changes everything. The end.